Hi, this video is going to be dedicated to be a demonstration of some of the skills you'll need for the calendar project. Now, it's not meant to be an exact duplicate of the project. What you want to do is you want to look at the directions and you want to look at the rubric to understand the group dynamic of the project. And remember, I'm going to show you how to do the technicals on a single day and a single event, but you should have five different days or five different events, and the resources that you're going to provide should be distributed throughout those 5 days. So it's not going to be an exact replica, but it should give you a pretty good idea. Now, the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to get together in your group, and you're going to need to elect someone to be the group organizer who really just needs to create the calendar and to share it with the other member or members of the group with the correct permissions. That's really the sum and total of what it is that the group organizer or the leader needs to do. So decide on that. Then you're going to decide on what your topic or theme should be. And this can be a lot of different things. I mean, it can be things that are associated with particular days. So you could decide that you were going to do great Renaissance artists, and on their birthdays throughout the year you would provide a link, and then the materials would be available to students on those days. So that's something you could do, and now the date is associated with the particular person involved. Okay, but you don't have to do that. You could simply decide that I am going to do a project and students are going to check into this calendar every Monday for 4 weeks to get the resources that they need. And then you simply pick a date to start and you create the other, well, actually 4 entries, so I guess it would have to be 5 weeks if you were going to follow that model. And you don't have to do it that way either. You could do it from Monday through Friday. You could do it every other day until you reached 5. So the dates shouldn't be confusing to you. They can be directly associated with a project, or they can simply be dates that students are to access the material. Okay, let's get into the technicals now. The first thing that the team leader is, now only one person is going to do this, the group organizer, is going to create a calendar. So they're going to come over here and to add a calendar in their Google Calendar and see create new calendar. They're going to give it a name that represents your topic. So this is something you should decide on in advance, come to an agreement on, and this name will be, okay, so this is, my project is going to be specifically about Christopher Columbus, although I could do a project about explorers and have a different explorer on every day. Description, you would include in there the time zone and create the calendar. Okay, it's that simple. The calendar will appear in that person's list of calendars, and then what they need to do is they need to come to settings. Now you can do that right away after you've created the calendar, or you can come back to your calendar and you're going to find it over here, and if it's over there you're going to need to come here and you're going to need to say settings and sharing. Okay, that's going to bring you back to the information you just entered, but then with a lot more options. So first thing that the group organizer will need to do is to make this available to the public. Okay, that's how students are going to see your calendar. It's the simplest thing to do. There's really no, there shouldn't be any personal or private or information that needs to be restricted. So just make sure that whatever you put up here, it's okay if anybody sees it. Okay, later on you can get a shareable link right here. And that could be a link that you would give to students, maybe through a Google Classroom or to post on a website, or in some other way you get them this link and they'll be able to get to the calendar. Now, next step is to share with people. So what you're going to do is click Add People, and now you're going to click, you're going to enter your partner's Gmail address. Now make sure that it's that MSET address so that people can get to it. I'll just use another address here as an example. And you're going to put that person in there and then change the permissions to let them make changes to events. Okay, there's really no need to give them sharing because the organizer is going to share it with whoever needs to be shared with. So it may be one person, that may be two people, but when you create it, and if you want to do two people, that's fine. Just add another email address down here. You can do it in one step. If you forget to do it in one step, you can come back and do it a second time. That's fine. You just say send, and these people should now have access to add to this calendar. Okay, on this particular screen, there's no need to save. If we look up at the top or we scroll down to the bottom, there is no save button. It saves as you do it. So just come back to your settings, and you guys should be ready to work. Okay. You do want to talk a little bit. You want to come to an agreement about what types of things are going to be on this calendar, how you're going to divide up the work. You could make that a very general thing where each person is responsible for their own section. So if we were to do that, if this was an explorers calendar and there were 3 people in your group, someone could do explorers before a certain date, someone could do explorers between that date and a subsequent date, and then someone could do explorers after that. That would be one way to divide it. You could get together and brainstorm a list of who you wanted to include overall, and then just divide it up amongst yourselves and decide what days they were going to be done on. But from the group perspective, it really just involves a little discussion and a little coordination about what's going to be there. Okay, outside of the group organizer who's creating and sharing the calendar, there's really not a lot of technical overlap you're going to need here. You just need to be on the same page as to what you're going to do. Okay, and then the last thing I should demonstrate for you is how to create an event and include what you want to include. Now if you look at the rubric, you're going to see that each person is responsible for 5 events, so 5 different days. You're responsible for a total of 15 resources. Now you could put 3 sources on each of your 5 days and that would be fine, but you don't have to. I mean, a particular date might have 4 resources and another might have 2, and that would also be okay. Look also at the specifics of what should be included. It gives you some minimums. You want to have at least one website, although I tend to think that there'll be more than that. It doesn't have to be. There has to be one. You're going to include at least 1 video. Again, out of the 15, there may be more. There may be 5. You're also going to include in there at least 1 map. So I'll demonstrate how to do that in just a minute. And I don't mean an image of a map. What I mean is a map where you've created it or set it up in Google Maps and then use that address to share. So it's a live map people can go into. They can zoom in, they can zoom out. They can save a copy of it for themselves if they wanted to. And the other thing that has to be included is some way for students to demonstrate their learning. Okay, so whenever you're doing any type of activity, what you really want to focus is not just providing the resources, but devising them in such a way that it encourages or requires the students to really engage with those resources. So don't just give them websites and expect something back. And one of the simplest ways to do this would be to create a Google form, a Google Doc, create a template for a slide presentation that you can distribute to them through the calendar, etc. Anything like that, and you'll see that the minimums for these things are pretty low, whereas you only have to include 1 website, 1 video, etc. And I did that purposely to not put you in a little box and leave a lot of those choices, up to you, so that they can fit your project. Now let's take a look at how to do one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate a whole bunch of resources in one event. But remember, this is not really the model. What you're going to do is decide where those resources fit best. Okay, so I'm going to click on a date. I'm just going to put a title. In this case, I'm going to put all the information about Christopher Columbus in this one spot. And I'm going to make sure that this goes on to the correct calendar. If I accept the default here, And this is common. I'll get projects and people will have done all the work and I won't see any of it. And it's because they've put the work or some of the work on their default calendar, and yet they send a link to their project calendar or they share their project calendar and the work is simply not there. It's an easy mistake to make because you may be viewing multiple, the events on multiple calendars as you're working, so you really do have to pay attention that it gets on the right calendar. Now, if you make a mistake, let me even make a mistake here. If you make a mistake and you save that, that's fine, because when you go into edit, as we've seen in our instructional video, that you can always come down here to where the calendar is and just switch it. Okay, the biggest area that you're going to use in here is this description area, and this is how you're going to pass your resources to your students. Now, you could put a whole bunch of instructions in here if you wanted, but remember, you can simply put a Google Doc. You can put those instructions on a Google Doc and you can link to that. The one thing you do want to do is put enough text in here so that it's just not links to resources and it provides a little context for the students. So please access the resources below in order and complete this project on Now, in actuality, I might want to do something a little more informative than that, but you get the idea. You can include that in your description. Now, up at the top, I have a series of resources open just to give you an example. So, if I click on the first one, this is a nice web page from Britannica.com that provides an awful lot of information about Columbus. It's all good background material. So I am going to copy that link, click in there and highlight it, and then you can right click and copy, or you can use your Control C, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, and then I'm going to type some text, and that text is going to serve as the text for my link. I can simply highlight that, use the link, and paste in that address, and there you go. Now, this is possible. These controls were added later. In a few years ago when you're using Google Calendar, you had to kind of write all of this in HTML. So that was kind of an extra step and an extra learning process, but now it's quite easy. And you have the basic controls. I could, I can add text, I can bold, italics, underline. You tend to not want to do too much because it gets confused with links. I can also turn these things into lists. So if I'm going to give them their resources and I decided, it helped the organizational process to number them, I could do that with the links, and I can make list items into hyperlinks, or I could make it a bulleted list, whatever it is that I wanted to do. I could also add attachments directly here. So if I had a document that I wanted to distribute to them, I could just upload it directly from my computer. Now remember, you can't do that with the Google Doc because the Google Docs can only live in Google Space, in the Google Cloud. So it wouldn't be uncommon to have a project where everything was a link and you hadn't uploaded anything, and that's fine. The second resource just to consider, this is an image. I went to Google Images and I searched for Voyages of Columbus, and this is nice. It shows them all the paths here. I'm going to click on that. That's good information. First voyage, second voyage, third voyage, fourth voyage. And what I can do here, if I right click, is I can copy the image address. So instead of them having to come in here and search, here, let me open a window and paste that for you. If I put in that image address, you can see it just opens a nice image of the image, and not embedded in a web page or not in this Google search. So that's another thing that you can do. Follow the 4 voyages. Okay, and easy peasy. I just make that into a link. That's fine. Okay. Third resource I'm going to show to you is this. This is another web page. This is pre-Columbian Hispaniola. So this is about the natives that inhabited the island before Columbus got there. And this resource is being provided simply to make this a more complex project. I mean, sometimes we look at, especially with younger students, there's been a tendency to look at this from the perspective of Columbus or from the Europeans. But I think it's important to understand this from another perspective. Okay, and again, simple here. The fourth resource I have here is one that deals with what was happening in Spain at the time. 1492, we sometimes think of as the date that Columbus left on his explorations. But there was a lot going on in Spain at that point, having to do, Spain had been occupied by the Moors up from Africa, and it had a Jewish population, a significant Jewish population at that time, and this is a very interesting article that tells you a little bit about what happened in 1492 that was very significant in Spanish history. So you can see what I'm doing in my project right now is what I'm doing in my project is I'm just using a lot of websites, but I'm trying to give a complex perspective when I do this. Okay, so even though it says I have to include one, in this one event here I've already included 4. Now let's get to Google Maps. Okay, this is a map of the actual port where Columbus left. This is where he departed from, and if people zoomed in or zoomed out, you can see that that's on the southern coast of Spain. There's Gibraltar, here's Portugal, so you can start to get a perspective of where that is. So we want to include at least one live map for people, something that's relevant. You could do more if you'd like. And the way to do this is simply to go to maps.google.com. Or as a matter of fact, I might even start before that. If I didn't know where Columbus had departed from, I would just go to a straight Google search and say Columbus port of departure, so you can see that I've done this search before. And I looked this up and I found out after a quick search where that was. And then I took that information and I went to maps.google.com, and then I was able to search for it there. Doing a search, I don't want to go for directions, I'm looking just for a search. And then from there, I can adjust my map. I'm doing this by spinning the wheel on my mouse, but I could use the plus and minus, although this seems to me to be much easier. And I can see, yep, that's it. There's the point that we were at before. And then I'm just going to get it in a perspective where I think it's a good perspective to start off or to look at. Now you can see that this is mentioning the city here. When I previously had done the search, I did it by the port, and that might be more appropriate, because it may impact the information in the side panel that comes up here. Okay, so this is all about the city, but if I go back and I look for the Columbus port of departure, let's see if I can find other information that'd be a little more helpful to me. There you go. And I'm going to come back now to my maps and see if I can find it with that type of search. And if I can, I may get better information. So just wait for half a second for this to load. There you go. And again, you want to do this by conducting the search in Google Maps. And I'm going to include Spain in there just in case this could bring me somewhere else. And then of course I'll have to verify that, the old port of Palos de la Frontera. But nope, not giving me any better information. So I'm going to do a little bit of searching, get the best view that I can. That probably is for me because that is the old port. That's where he would have departed from. Once I get this configured the way I want it, all that information will be represented up here in the URL. So I can click that and copy it. I can come back here and I'm going to say put some text in there, establish the link, and we'll see in a second. I can test it out here. And it brings me to an exact copy of what I set up, so that's just what I wanted. And the last thing, and the requirements here are not high, and I would encourage you to maybe do more than one of these, but this is a document I created where I'm looking for student feedback. Now, is it true that I could distribute this and collect it through Google Classroom, perhaps a little easier? That is true. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to at least see how you can make this available. I don't want to complicate it too much. See how you can make it available directly through your calendar. Now, the first thing I have to do now, because I'm not necessarily working in Google Classroom, is I have to create it in my Google Drive. When I open it up, I have to remember to share it. If I don't, it'll look fine to me, but my students are going to get this message that they need to request permission, and that's not what you want to have happen. So you basically go to share, you go to advanced. We've done this before. Specific people can access. No, I want it anyone with the link probably. And I want anyone with the link can view. That's fine because they'll be able to make their own copies. You probably want to give them a little directions on how to do that. And you don't want to disable this option to print or copy. This would prevent them from doing that easily. So you want to leave that available to them. And you do want to include some instructions in there about how to do it. And now that this is shared correctly, all I have to do is, let me go back to advanced and get this link up here. This will allow them to access that. I'll call this a student worksheet, although that's probably not the best name. Again, my directions in here should be better to really let them know so there's no confusion about what it is they have to do. I'm going to paste that link in there. I'm going to say OK, and let's save this and see what we've got. Okay, so it comes up as a simple entry on a calendar. Christopher Columbus, wow, comes up nice and neat, well organized. If I click on the first link, it opens up my first resource. I'm going to close down all these extras so we can see that it's the actual, that it's actually opening up from our links. Okay, so there we go. Follow the 4 voyages, opens in a new tab, brings me to the nice picture of the voyages, local inhabitants, fantastic. Major events in 1492, port of departure. Okay, brings me up to a Google map that I can manipulate, fantastic. And then student worksheet. Now one thing I would recommend is, okay, I just went through and tested this all, but of course I'm logged in the same account. So for these first 5 links that wouldn't be an issue, but possible that that 6th link is not shared correctly and that I'm just not going to know that because I'm logged in. So what you should do is access it the way your students will access it. And to do that, let's come to Christopher Columbus here. We're going to go to settings and sharing. We're going to slide down here. Let's go to share with specific people, and then below that we should find, there's notifications, there's integrate calendar. So this is a public URL to this calendar. because the calendar was made public, up here, this link will work. So let me copy that, and then I'm going to test this out. I'm going to log right out. So I'm going to sign out of my Google account, or I'm going to open a new browser, or I'm going to go to an incognito window where I'm not logged into Google. That's important. So I'm not logged in, I can see that, and I'm just going to paste that link, and there's my calendar. And there it is. For some reason I put it in August. I probably should go back and move that either to Columbus Day or to at least some day when we'll actually be in school. So I click on there. Looks a little different, but not bad. Okay, and I would expect all these links to work. I would want to test them all. Okay, they're coming up pretty quick, so I will. There you go. And then of course the most important one will wind up being the student worksheet, because that's the one that's likely to cause you problems. Look at that. I am not logged into a Google account and it is showing it to me, so that's a good thing. But one more thing you need to be aware of. Make a copy is not going to work because I'm not in a Google environment. So you're going to have to direct students that they need to be logged into their Google account. So let me sign in over here. I'm not going to log into the MSIT account. I'll log into another one, and that way the permissions, this will be similar to if a student was doing it. Okay, so it's still view only, so I'm not the owner of this and I don't have access to edit it, but I can make a copy now. And that's what you would probably want them to do, is to make a copy of this, complete it, and then have them maybe attach it and return it to you through a Google Classroom assignment. This is a nice option because if you don't have access to Google Classroom, if that's not something your district is using, then it makes sense they would make a copy or download it. They can download it as a Word file, complete it, and return it to you in some other way. Okay, you can see that there's also some options down here. This would copy it to your calendar, and by that I don't mean the calendar it was created on, but the calendar that you're logged in with. So I am looking at this public copy of this event or this calendar that was created in one account, but I am logged into another account. So if I click copy to my calendar, it's going to make a copy of this event and all the details into the one I'm logged into. There's also a more detail option. If you click more details, it's simply going to bring you again to the one that you're logged in with, and you can see this is very different. There are a lot of events on this one that were not on the other calendar, and it brings you here and shows you your calendar plus the information that's included in the shared calendar. Okay, as with most projects, an awful lot of this goes to pedagogy and design. The technical aspects are there to facilitate a good project, but what's really important is your teacher skills and how you set it up and how you design the project to keep students involved. Last note on this is, while I'm using this to distribute information to the students, I always want you to consider, especially once the students are old enough and their skills developed enough, to flip the script. Have them collect information, have them do research, and give them this as either an option or a requirement for them to organize their information through a calendar, share it with you, share it with each other. It's a nice project to have students involved with, and they can do so, if they're tech savvy, if they've been getting good instruction, and if they've been getting practice in these things. They can really do this at a fairly young age, maybe 3rd grade, 4th grade, certainly on up past that, even without the practice. They'll pick it up quick enough. So think about things. You're going to do your project as a sample, but in actual use, think about having students be the ones to create the resources.